views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Tonight, it's the debate for the Democratic primary in the 16th Congressional District, which includes the northern Bronx and also the southern portion of Westchester County. This is our third debate of the season. Two more to go after this, and we'll get you the full schedule right at the end of the program. Tonight's program is presented in conjunction with the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization that advocates for informed and active participation in government and works to increase understanding of major public policy issues. Our co-sponsors tonight are the Bronx Times, Schneps Media, and the Riverdale Press. The primary is on June 23rd, and all eligible voters are certainly encouraged to vote. Let's meet the four candidates who are with us tonight. They are middle school principal Jamaal Bowman, retired NYPD lieutenant and Gulf War veteran Sammy Ravelo. The incumbent is Eliot Engel, and also tax attorney Christopher Fink. Please note that special education teacher Andam Gerbergurgis put out a message yesterday that he is dropping out of the race, so he will not join us tonight. Candidates in tonight's debate, I will direct the question to one candidate. That candidate will respond, and then we will have a free-flowing dialogue that each candidate can participate in, with the original respondent having the final say on the next question before the next question is asked. No comments we ask be longer than 90 seconds. Please remember, because of the technology, the virtual technology, each candidate will need to be recognized before they speak, and at the end of the program, each candidate will be given the opportunity to deliver a 1-minute closing statement. Please note that tonight's questions and topics do include some of those submitted by the candidates themselves. I do want to just say, as we've said before our other debates, this has been a very trying time, not only for the Bronx, for the city, for the nation, and even the world. Many people have lost relatives to the coronavirus, and many people know people who have lost people, and many people know people who are ill, and so I think collectively we all agree that we wish best condolences and best get well soon wishes to anybody who's been affected. Of course, we've all been affected by it. But let's get right to our program. By prior agreement, the first question will be directed to Mr. Bowman. Let's get to what is obvious to all of us. It would be hard to ignore the obvious and most immediate. American cities are exploding in unrest like we have not seen in a very long time, maybe even more than a half a century, if not ever. The trigger, of course, was the killing of George Floyd at the hands of police in Minnesota. But these issues have been festering for years. New Yorkers will remember, and I could list many names: Abner Louima, Patrick Dorismond, in the Bronx, Amadou Diallo, Marley Graham. Unfortunately, the list is quite long. If you are a Congress member, and I guess for the incumbent, we'll say you are a Congress member, what would you do, or what are you doing to deal with this and address the myriad of issues that have been raised by this very terrible situation?
Well, thank you, Gary, so much for having me, and thank you so much for your question. The first time I was a victim of police brutality, I was 11 years old. I was outside, just hanging out and, having a good time with my friends. Someone called the police and said we were too loud. And the police didn't just approach us and ask us to be quiet. They handcuffed me. They threw me against the wall. They dragged my face on the ground. And then they let us go. I had to go upstairs and show my mother my face that was all bruised up. And the thing, as I reflect on that incident, the thing that moves me the most is how my mother and I didn't do anything. We had no thoughts about, going to report it. We didn't feel empowered in that moment. And that's the reality of many Black and Latinos in this country. We live feeling as if we are occupied by the police, both physically and psychologically, each and every day. We need to focus on restorative justice in our communities. We need to hold police accountable when they commit a crime. They should not be allowed to investigate themselves. It should be an independent investigation from the Department of Justice and the FBI. The police have been militarized over the last 30 years. Congressman Engel, supported the '94 crime bill, which led to the militarization of police. That bill needs to be repealed and replaced. And mass incarceration needs to be a target of all of our policies, in addition to institutional racism, which lives in our police departments and lives throughout every American institution. When Congressman Engel signed that bill in 1994, it not only led to the militarization of the police, but it contributed to mass incarceration, contributed to stop and frisk, and it led to the explosions that we see today. We also have to deal with the issue of poverty. We see the rage manifesting because people are living in poverty, and they've been living in poverty for decades. And until we deal with institutional racism and poverty seriously, this anger and rage will continue.
Congressman Engel, I'll let you respond since he addressed you directly.
Well, let me first of all say, ask for just a quick moment of silence for George Floyd. What happened to him should not happen to anybody, and I'm just heartbroken, ashamed, crying. This is not something that any of us should or could ever accept as something that just happens. It is just frightful. And, I think that unfortunately, part of the atmosphere that has been created in this country has been created because of Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump right now should be giving moral authority, should be getting up and trying to calm things down, should be addressing the American people, should be talking to the American people. Where is he? He's nowhere to be found but to call a conference and say stupid things. And so I have been one of the real pains in the neck to Donald Trump in Washington. I was part of the impeachment team. I worked closely with Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters to make sure monies come to our districts. And those are things that are important. Mr. Bowman seems to like to talk about the crime bill. Well, the crime bill was voted for by Bernie Sanders. The crime bill was voted for by 2/3 of the Congressional Black Caucus. The crime bill was voted for. The crime bill actually, at the same time as part of the crime bill, we had eliminated a lot of the things like assault part of it as well. So yeah, the crime bill needs to be adjusted. It needs to be changed. We're working on it, and we need to be very careful about it. But
when you say you're working on it,
Mr. Bowman, let's let him finish. We're just about up to time. Let's let the other candidates in, and I'll give you a chance to respond afterwards. Mr. Engel, why don't you wrap that up, and then Mr. Ravelo, and then Mr. Fink.
That bill was a long time ago, and there are things that need changing. For instance, I'm doing with Hakeem Jeffries. We're making it a felony for certain conduct by the police, and that's what happened. This also was the bill contained violence against women Act. So when you take, and let me tell Mr. Bowman, he doesn't understand how it works in Washington. You have this bill, and there are many different things in a bill, and you have to take the good with the bad, or the good, and you have to make a decision.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ravelo. I'm sure you want to weigh in on this, sir.
Oh, absolutely. First, let me start by saying that we hold the entire family of George Floyd in our prayers as we heal from this murder. I just want to say one thing. I don't know if I've understood the question correctly. I heard Mr. Bowman complaining a lot about law enforcement. I heard Mr. Engel, who's our congressman, also complain, and their feather in the cap is blaming the police. I was a police officer for 26 years. I actually worked in the community. I just want to say one thing. in 26 years, I was involved in probably over 18 to 22,000 arrests. I never got a civilian complaint. I actually know what needs to be done to mend the fences. But blaming the police for all the problems, it's not the way to go. Mr. Engel, I'm sorry, Congressman Engel put out a tweet yesterday that was actually not worthy of a congressman, showing a police order trying to, run over some folks that were trying to block the police. That's shameful because that's not mending the fences. That's just as bad as Donald Trump sending out the disgusting tweets that he has. I know for a fact the entire law enforcement community is saddened by what happened with George Floyd, and they don't want to be put in this situation. But the police here in New York City and the police in Yonkers, I know that their heart is in the right place. And that's taken away from what really, really happens from a lot of the issues that we actually need to resolve. I personally believe that there are things that we can change within the law enforcement community, but I know for a fact that they're saddened deeply, and not everybody should pay for what that disgusting officer did in Minnesota.
All right, so Mr. Fink can weigh in, and Mr. Bowman and Mr. Engel also can weigh in. Go ahead, Mr. Fink.
Thank you. And I agree with all the speakers that the systematic racism in our country has to end. The reaction has been understandable. We have to do something about it. I'm a parent. I'm a father. I have 5 children. One of my children is African American, and he doesn't understand how white people can hate black people. I don't understand it either. But they're still out there hundreds of years, and the only way to stop them is disarm them and prosecute hate no matter what. But the problem that I had with the 3 previous speakers is they didn't answer the question. You asked, what could you do as a congressperson? And that's my concern, is that people are not looking for a plan. I have a plan. Just like Mayor Bottoms, she took action in Atlanta and took action decisively and quickly to disarm the situation. That's what we need now. We need responsible leadership, and we need a plan. So here's what I would do. I would expedite the trial of racist Derek Chauvin. Right now, impanel a jury. I used to be an attorney. Convict him now, because we all know he's guilty. 2, I'd arrest the other 3 officers today. Not 4 days from now, not 5 days from now. If you don't think there's probable cause, then you didn't watch the 8 minutes and 43 seconds. I did. It's just not the police thing either. I'd send Amy Cooper, the woman from Central Park last week, I'd send her to jail for hate crime too. And I would enact federal legislation that makes it a hate crime to any officer who's convicted of manslaughter or murder in doing their job. And I would add on a life imprisonment sentence to do so. I think we need to ban chokeholds. We need to require de-escalation and apply standards of reasonableness and necessary. And finally, collect data on police encounters so people know, and it's published, people know what's going on in our world. We need a plan and we need action. We can't just keep complaining about this.
Mr. Bowman, let's keep it to a minute, and then Mr. Engel, and we'll see.
Yeah, I like a word also.
Okay.
Yeah, Congressman Engel, institutional racism did not begin with Donald Trump. Institutional racism is embedded in America's DNA. It impacts all of us. But prior to the coronavirus pandemic, the #1 pandemic impacting Black America was racism. So it's something we live with every single day. And when you say you're working on it, how long does it take to work on it? The 1994 crime bill was in 1994. We are many decades later, and we're still working on this thing, right? So we need to defund the police, end the militarization of the police, and we need to transfer that funding into our schools, into our healthcare facility. We need to hire more nurses, hire more teachers, hire more school psychologists. We need to create and grow our care economy overall, from early childhood care to long-term care for our seniors.
Mr. Engel, go ahead, and then Mr. Ravelo.
Well, let me say this. The crime in 1994 had other things as well. It's an omnibus bill. It had the Violence Against Women Act, called VAWA. It had an assault rifle ban, which was reinstated 10 years later, which was put back into place, not reinstated, but pulled out because of the Republicans 10 years later. Look, Mr. Bowman, you're black and I'm not. I don't pretend to be able to think that I have endured as much pain as you have and your families have. But I have many, many black brothers and sisters, and I feel their pain and I feel my pain because this is happening in the country I love, the United States of America. And when will it end? We all have our work cut out for us. And of course, the African American community, they're the ones who will lead the charge because they're the ones who feel the pain more than anybody else.
We all have to lead
Thank
the
you.
charge, Congressman Engel. It has to be all of us, not just one
Right.
community. It has to be everyone.
Please,
Well,
let's just keep some order. Mr. Engel, just wrap it up because I want to get Mr. Ravelo, and we certainly have
All of-
other issues
all of
to get.
us together. You know, I went to Ramali's funeral in the church. I went there and hugged his parents and done it year in and year out. I mean, we have to understand we're all in this together. You know, let me just finish. I have a colleague named John Lewis, civil rights activist. By the way, he's endorsed me for re-election. He has this saying, and I love it, and I always repeat it. He says, we may have come here on different ships, but now we're all in the same boat together.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
but we came here in
Mr. Bowman,
chains. We came
please.
here in chains. It's not the same thing.
Please.
So we have to
Yeah.
address it differently, more urgently and aggressively. Because when you look at this district, the
Mr.
Black and
Bowman.
Latino community is suffering more than anyone else. And it's not just this district, it's across the country.
Mr. Bowman, let me just interject. I feel your passion, but we have other candidates who really deserve the opportunity to speak, and I really want to make sure to give them that opportunity. Mr. Ravelo, you wanted to weigh in.
Thank you. I'm Latino, and as you can see, I am also black. I was also a police officer. A lot of police officers are out there right now trying to do God's work. They are black and Latino. Mr. Bowman, with his rhetoric, he is dividing. He is planning to go to Congress to divide us and keep dividing us. Right now, it's not that type of rhetoric. All right. He is taking away from the important issue that, you know, we had a murder of Mr. George Floyd. So I don't think he is ready to actually lead. And obviously, Mr. Engel, he lets people push him to make decisions like putting out tweets that actually stoke division rather than unity. So I think these guys, it's time for elect a new type of leadership and people that are actually going to start working together with us.
Mr. Fink, be quick, and then Mr. Bowman, you have the right to wrap it up, but let's everybody keep it short because we have many issues to get to. Mr. Fink, go ahead.
Gary, thank you. And this is obviously, if not the most important issue, it's an incredibly important issue right now. And I just want to respond, as I said before, we need leadership. We need leadership from both sides, not just the African-American community, but the white community. White people of privilege need to lead, and that's why I'm asking the congressman to lead. There's protests planned for all over our district. And I understand that he's at his home in Maryland, but he should be here with the protesters the way that we will be here. They need to see leadership in this time of action. And you should
Home
just
in
be
the
here.
Bronx. I'm at my home in the Bronx right now. My home is in the Bronx, not in Maryland. So that
Okay, Mr. Bowman, you wrapped it up, and I want to move on. Go ahead.
Well, institutional racism is not about the color of your skin alone. It's about the psychology that impacts all of us and leads to the decisions that we make. We live in a nation of white nationalism and white superiority as a race. And psychologically, it impacts all of us, Black, Latino, white, Asian, and everyone else. I want to ask Congressman Engel, does he apologize for supporting the crime bill? And does he apologize for militarizing the police?
Thank you very much. The next question goes to Mr. Ravelo. I want to kind of put a couple of things together. I can see that we get one question. Everybody's going to have a lot to say. So let's just talk about the economy in general. Let's talk about Andrew Yang's proposal for universal basic income that you have supported, giving every American $1,000 a month, possibly in exchange for current welfare and housing voucher programs. So number one, is it workable? And then we also really got to talk about, and I want to put it all together, the reopening of businesses and how should that be handled? What is the long-term plan for the economy in this district? So, Mr. Ravelo, I'll lump it all together and we'll start with you, and then we'll go back around the room.
Well, obviously, we know we're at around 40 million Americans lost their jobs, and they're hurting. They're hurting. Right now, there's a lot of people don't know if they're going to get their jobs back. And we have leadership in Washington that it's flailing. They don't come with a cohesive, obviously, message to let them are going to be okay. We're passing bills and there's another bill, and there is no understanding with the public. So when it comes to universal basic income, that's something that I looked at. Obviously, that was proposed by Andrew Yang, and we want to study it, and we want to make sure that as artificial intelligence takes over, we want to make sure that people have their basic income. That would be like a stimulus every month, where every American would get $1,000 and use it for their basic needs. It's something of a study right now. We're looking at it. Hopefully, I was hoping that Congress would have implemented for at least the 6 months that we are in this crisis. And we're still starting to see how we're going to fund it. It's obviously vouchers, housing vouchers, and healthcare would be included with the bill.
Thank you very much. Others I want to talk about. I know, Mr. Fink, you had some.
I'll wait my turn this time.
That's all right. Listen, the beautiful thing about all of this and the four of you is the passion that you all bring, and I think that's helpful to all of us. Mr. Fink, I know you've had proposals about the economy. Why don't you just address those, and then we'll get everybody in.
Thank you. And, we've studied this for a lot of years. As far back as the 1980s, there was a congressman from Buffalo that proposed this. This doesn't work. As a former tax attorney, I understand we need a more progressive tax code. That's something that will provide economic equality and will get the money directed in the right places, not $1,000 check to everybody. That's random. And that, I think, is a way of Donald Trump buying votes. But what we really need to focus coming out of this pandemic is on creating jobs. Jobs is a very important part of my 3-part plan, which is the See Forward plan, which covers social, environmental, and economic. The third being economic. As Sammy rightfully pointed out, 36 million jobs were lost during this pandemic. And Forbes magazine said 42% of those jobs will never come back. So my proposal creates jobs in both infrastructure and renewable energy. These are great long-term jobs that provide careers for a lifetime. They're not just quick $1,000 checks that you can write to everyone. So then what happens at the end of 6 months when they don't have the $1,000 anymore? I think the federal government should educate them, train them, and provide a federal backing to these job programs, because it helps the employee and it helps everybody around us. It fixes the crumbling infrastructure in our district and creates renewable energy across the country.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Program that works.
Thank you, Mr. Engel, and then Mr. Bowman.
Well, certainly something that I would look at, because we need to do big things in order to get our economy back in the swing of things. And I would absolutely look into it. But let me tell you some of the other stuff I've been doing with this in Washington. Some people don't think I should be. I procured $5 billion in funding for New York hospitals, which is 5 times more than any other state. I got that. I got $5 billion in additional education funds for New York in the HEROES Act. I did that. 76 million for community health centers in New York. I was proud to do that. Again, $5 billion in funding for New York hospitals. That's 5 times more than any other state got. The seniority system works in Washington. I've now had lots of seniority being in Congress a long time. And I have the clout. I bring home the bacon. I bring home the money. I can do those kinds of things. That's not something a freshman can do. And so I'm very proud of what I've done. The seniority system was designed so that people who are in for a long time can produce for their district. That's what I've been producing. My opponents, they're all worthy. They can denigrate my job all they want. But the fact of the matter is I've run, I've been elected 17 times because I'm in New York. I'm for the people. I bring home the bacon. I work for everybody. And we have to pull together. Mr. Bowman talks. We've had so many things in this district through the years. Nights out against crime, violence against people, all kinds of rallies. Never saw Mr. Bowman even at one. He decided he wanted to run for Congress. So now he's telling us about how much he's connected to the community. Nobody saw him. Nobody's seen him for years. Until he decided he was running for Congress, you didn't know who he is. I've been around a long time, 30 years, producing results and very proud of the results that I've produced. And let me finally say this. I have lived in this district since I was 12 years old. I've been born in the Bronx. I've been in the Bronx all my life. I went to school in the Bronx, Lehman College, guidance counselor. I'm proud of what I've done in the Bronx. So don't need someone in lecturing us what to do. We in the Bronx know what to do. And in Westchester, we know what to do.
Congressman Engel said he brings home the bacon, but we have people in this district who are starving. They were starving prior to the pandemic. They're starving now. So where is this bacon to feed the community? We have pockets of this district where as high as 30% of the population are living in food deserts. So how is that bacon helping us? He talks about the money he's brought for education and for healthcare. I was rallying at St. Joseph's Hospital with NISNA because they don't have PPEs to protect their nurses. 50% of the nurses in St. Joseph's Hospital tested positive for COVID. So where is this funding? When is it going to get here? And how much of it is coming to our district? In terms of your question, we need a federal jobs guarantee. We're living in the largest crisis since the Great Depression. And you know what FDR did after the Great Depression? He implemented a New Deal. He started the Workers' Progress Administration. That's exactly what we need right now. We need a federal jobs guarantee in the areas of environment, healthcare, education, and manufacturing in alignment with clean, renewable energy. That's what we need right now.
Mr. Ravelo, you get the final word on this question.
Yes, a couple of things. $5 billion, the congressman says that he brought to the, he led to bring to city. So who was it? AOC saying, Hakeem Jeffries is saying that they led. I mean, every single congressperson from New York is saying that they led. At that rally that for PPEs that Jamaal Bowman is talking about, I was there as well. Chris Fink is right. Our number one goal right now, is jobs. We need jobs. We need people. People are hurting and they don't know what's going to happen, when the next pick is going to come. So that should be our first priority. And in Congress, that's one of the things that I'm going to propose. And that's one of the things that I'm going to fight for.
Thank you very much.
Gary, Congressman Engel said a lot there about me. So I would like just 30 seconds to respond to one other thing that he said.
Do it quickly, and then we
you talk about being absent in the community. I've been here. I founded a middle school in this district 10 years ago. I've served this district as a middle school principal for 10 years. My middle school connected with Montefiore Medical Center to build a healthcare attachment to our school. So I've been here on the ground for the last 10 years doing the work, not just in education, but beyond. Congressman Engel has lived in Maryland for 27 years. He is not even in this district doing the work with our people. It's unacceptable.
Yeah. I mean,
well, let's let Mr. Engel, and I do want to get him the next question, but he can respond to that. Mr. Engel, go ahead.
Bowman, you were paid to be a principal, and maybe you were a good principal, and maybe you weren't. Although there were a lot of parents that tell me they didn't like the fact that you were taking their children and doing political work with them. But the fact of the matter is, you were paid for being a teacher or a principal. I don't denigrate that work that you do, but everything else in the community, you were nowhere to be found. When you decided you wanted to run for Congress, suddenly you're there. I have lived.
I was a lead organizer in the opt-out movement that pushed education
I'd
policy
really like
to increase the funding across New York State. I was a lead organizer and a lead voice in that movement. I testified in front of the Governor Cuomo's Common Core Task Force as part of the opt-out movement. We flipped the New York State Board of Regents to get more progressive policy in place. We've changed the restorative practices and culturally responsive education in our schools because of the activist work I've done beyond the walls of the school. It's well documented.
Mr. Bowman, you have got to let the other candidates speak. I appreciate your passion, but we have 4 people here, and we'd like to have some order so we can move on to the next thing. Mr. Engel, let's talk about the Democratic Party and politics in Washington. What are the values of the Democratic Party that you support, and how will you support them and pursue them in the next congressional term? Also, how can some traditional initiatives historically championed by Democrats like universal health care, environmental and economic justice be achieved with Congress so fractured politically? Are there compromises? If so, where?
Well, I hope there won't need to be compromises, because I hope that the Democrats, that we will win the House back again and win the Senate and win the presidency. And I've endorsed Joe Biden. I wonder if my opponents have endorsed him. I've endorsed him, and I think he will make a very, very good president. I'm a Democrat. I've always been a Democrat for 2 simple words: social justice. My parents were Democrats. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'll try to do this quickly. I was born in the Bronx, and I grew up in a city housing project. I grew up in NYCHA housing. So I have always been for affordable housing, always fought for those kinds of things people need. My dad was an iron worker. He was a union welder. So I grew up with the trade union movement and understanding that working people need help, and government sometimes needs to give them the help. I grew up with that. It's not something that I thought of. It's something that was part of me in growing up. I attended public schools all my life, and that's why I'm supported by the teachers union, and I'm supported by Randy Weingarten, who's head of the teachers union. People know where I stand. People know my record, and I will continue to be there to fight for the people of the Bronx and Westchester.
I want to extend the question a little bit about the factions in the Democratic Party. And so, Mr. Engel, maybe you could address that and have others also talk about the factions in the Democratic Party.
The Democratic Party has always been factionalized, and we somehow pull out of it because we know to have the Republicans in control would just be so terrible for the country. What we're trying to do now is put money in people's pockets. I work closely with Nancy Pelosi, Speaker. She, by the way, has endorsed me for re-election. I worked with her on the impeachment. I was one of 6 chairs to work on impeachment in terms of the Democrats, what we were doing with Trump. So my record has always been there. We want to move this country in a direction that, frankly, I think all the people up here would agree. But we need to do it, and we need to work towards that goal. And the first thing we need to do is dump Trump.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fink, I'm presuming you want to talk about Democratic politics.
Yes, and I would just hope that we can focus going forward on the questions that were asked. It seems like people just want to talk about what they want to talk about, but that's the problem with the Democratic Party right now, in my view, is people just want to yell and scream about whatever they want to yell and scream about. What I want to do is get things done the way I had my whole career. And so things like healthcare for all, there's a way to get there, to provide that basic human right that every American should have to healthcare coverage, whether it be through your own plan or through some kind of Medicaid. I want to make sure that everyone's covered. I also, the environmental issue that you brought up, Gary, is one of the #1 priorities in this country today. All these other issues we talk about today don't matter if we can't get the environmental issue right and get us to a carbon neutral grid by 2040. And this is one of the factions you talk about in the Democratic Party. You have all this screaming about the Green New Deal, but it's by people who know nothing at all about energy. I've worked in energy for 34 years. In the last 10 years, I've done over 24 billion of renewable energy. So I know how to get it done. It's just not made up stuff. This is why every question you've asked, we have a plan for. Instead of just pie in the sky, let's get this done, let's get an energy neutral grid by 2030. That's not going to happen unless you know how to make it happen.
Mr. Bowman, we were talking about the Democratic Party, sir.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Am I next? I thought Sammy was next. I could be wrong.
No, we got it.
No worries. The Democratic Party is designed to fight for working class people. It's designed to fight for the poor. It's designed to focus on the general welfare of all people. Again, going back to FDR's New Deal, going back to Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty and focus on Title I schools, that's what the Democratic Party is supposed to be. Unfortunately, over the last several decades, the Democratic Party has been co-opted and compromised by the financially wealthy and the wealthy elite in Wall Street. Congressman Engel is completely funded by corporate PACs and large donors. Our campaign doesn't take any money from corporate PACs. We are funded by grassroots organizations and individual small dollar contributions. We have been endorsed by over 40 grassroots organizations, including the largest immigrants' rights organization in New York State, Make the Road Action, the largest nurses union in New York State, NYSNA, the leading climate justice youth organization across the country, the Sunrise Movement. We've worked with the grassroots while I was in education, which, by the way, the school, I'm the founding principal of Cornerstone Academy for Social Action Middle School. It didn't exist. We saw something wrong with the public school system. We did something about it. We built the school. We knew the community needed health care. We did something about it, and we're about to bring a healthcare center to the community.
Thank you very much.
Education policy was unjust. We fought to push and change education policy. We need political imagination and creativity in Congress, and that's what I bring to the table.
Mr. Ravelo and Mr. Engel, you get the final word on this question.
Yes, the Democratic Party is a big tent party. See a lot of factions and respecting each other's opinion. Unfortunately, we got certain factions that it's either all or nothing, and that's the part that Mr. Bowman is a part of. It's that part that you have to agree with them 100%, or you're not part of the party. As far as Mr. Congressman Engel, yes, I endorse Joe Biden. I support Joe Biden. I hope he wins the presidency. So to answer your question, yes, we're hoping that Joe Biden obviously wins this upcoming election, and I'm going to be there supporting him and campaigning for him. Obviously, the most important things and the reason why we are still part of the party is, because of the unions, the support of the unions, housing, healthcare, obviously climate change and education. So I know the Democratic Party is on the right side of those issues. That's why we support the Democrats.
Thank you very much, Mr. Engel. You get the final word on this.
Well, I do agree. We are a Big Ten party, and we should be a Big Ten party. And we should understand that people all over this country are hurting, that this administration has not done anything, the Trump administration, to help people, to help working people, and that I've been a constant thorn in Donald Trump's side, and will continue to go. So Biden will be elected president, and then I think we'll move forward with all the positive programs that I'm sure all of us up here support. I mean, we generally support the same problems and the same issues. People, years ago when I was growing up, you had people in key positions who were from the southern states because they had all the seniority and they were all the committee chairs and whatever. We've worked it now in New York that we have me as chairman and so many other people, Hakeem and Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Knapp, and I could go on and on. We have been able to get funds for New York again on the system that we have.
Where are those funds?
Thank you. Mr. Bowman, please. Mr. Engel, thank you very much. I do want to move on. Mr. Fink, you talked about the environment. Let's talk about the environment. Studies are underway linking peaker plants and air pollution with the incidence of COVID-19. You brought up the Green New Deal. I suppose on the environmental protection scale, the Green New Deal is on one end, and the Trump administration's elimination of dozens of EPA regulations are on the other end. Is a massive policy package that would remake the U.S. economy and eliminate or seek to eliminate carbon emissions a realistic, doable, and ultimately the right way to go at this time? So on the table, let's limit our answers to the Green New Deal. Do we like it or do we not?
I like the goals of the Green New Deal. What I would add to it is practical ways to get there. As I said, I built windmills in West Texas because the wind blows there at night. I've done solar farms in Southern California because the sun shines during the day. Same thing in Florida, biomass plants, hydro plants in Ohio. I know how to get it done. I'm not just saying, let's get rid of our climate crisis. There's ways to get it done, both on the energy side, on the transportation side. We're going to move to electric vehicles very quickly. If we do that, we need to put the infrastructure in place to power those vehicles. You can't power those by fossil fuel and get the benefits that you get from electric vehicles. So my plan, my See Forward plan, has ways to create jobs, to build renewable energy across this country the way we've been doing. You mentioned the Trump policies. Before Trump got into office, we had a clean power plan that would have gotten all fossil fuel plants offline by 2030. Our clients actually had plans to get rid of them by 2026. Once Trump came in, decimated the clean power plan, those folks who had coal plants said, we economically can't afford to build new plants right now. So why don't we just run these dirty plants and let it ruin the environment? And we saw during COVID-19, the people whose health were most affected were people in cities that were most polluted. We have this problem right here in our district. You can see when it rains, the Bronx River Parkway, the Hutchinson River Parkway, cars sit there for hours polluting our air, affecting everyone from Yonkers to Bronx.
We want to let other people speak. Mr. Bowman, I know you had some questions from the previous question. You can use your time any way you see fit.
Well, I'll focus on the Green New Deal for now. It's something I support 100%. It's one of the reasons why the Sunrise Movement chose to endorse our campaign. This district is particularly vulnerable because we have the Long Island Sound on one end, we have the Henry Hudson on the other. So we're incredibly vulnerable to rising sea levels on both ends. You're also 3 times more likely to die of asthma in the Bronx than anywhere else in the country. And there's similar statistics when you look at Yonkers, Mount Vernon, and New Rochelle. So we support a Green New Deal, and we get there by ending our investments and rebates into the fossil fuel industry. The federal government subsidizes the fossil fuel industry to the tune of billions of dollars per year. We need to reinvest that money into clean, renewable energy. Now is the time to do it because there are 40 million people without jobs. We also got to look at our military budget and spending as well, because the military is one of the largest contributors to the climate emergency that we are currently living in. And Eliot Engel continues to be a supporter of the military to support of weapons manufacturers because he is funded by some of the largest weapon manufacturers in this country. Let's reinvest those resources and infrastructure into a Green New Deal.
Mr. Ravelo, about the Green New Deal and the environment.
Well, obviously, you see why Washington is broken. You know, we keep electing people that are not there to resolve issues, but become part of the problem, as you can see with some people in this panel. The Green New Deal, the problem that I have with it is it's not binding. They voted on it, but they voted in the House, but they didn't make it binding. In the Senate, it was voted 57-0. The Democrats decided not to, like, you know, it's a gimmick. They were using it in Washington as a gimmick. But we really have a crisis with our climate. So there's 4 things that I would love to do to at least start moving the ball forward and start giving jobs to the people in this district. I would like to increase federal funding for local and state infrastructure projects designed to mitigate effects of climate change, like flood walls. Like Jamaal Bowman said, we're next to the Long Island Sound. We need to start thinking about having a national smart grid. I like federal subsidies to U.S. businesses wishing to export green technology into our country, and we got to get back into the Paris Climate Agreement. I think it's crucial because without other countries also participating, and we lost the leadership on that, it's not going to be effective unless we rally other countries as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Engel.
Well, I am an original co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. I was at the press conference when we rolled it out, we brought it out, and I've been a very strong supporter of the Green New Deal. While we're talking about the environment, I'm chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The only bill that was passed by the House to do something positive in terms of the environment was H.R. 9, which would force the United States back into the Paris agreements. You may remember that President Trump pulled us out of the Paris Accords. My bill, which passed the committee, would bring us back. That's why I've gotten the support of all the environmental groups, because they rate me very, very high, in the high 90s, if not 100. Because I've been a fighter for the environment all these years. And finally, there's a lot of talk here about weapons manufacturers, and I blocked the president from selling all this weaponry, to allow the company to sell all this weaponry to Saudi Arabia. And right now, the things that everybody—
You initially supported it, Congressman Engel. You were one of a few Democrats that initially supported the sale of stuff to Saudi Arabia.
We're almost out of time, and I want to get another question in. So, Mr. Engel, just finish your statement, and then we'll move on.
Let me say that right now, the story that everybody's reading about in the papers, which I am in the middle of, the president fired the inspector general who was looking at selling weaponry to Saudi Arabia, and we are blocking it.
Please wrap that up, sir.
We're going into court. It's been all over the papers. What we're trying to do is say to the president, you cannot fire the inspector general that was doing the work to see if this was true or not.
Thank you.
Holding him to feet to the fire on all of this. So I'm proud of my mental record. I'm proud to be a original co-sponsor, and I'm very proud of the committees all supporting.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fink, you can wrap it up. Let's take 30 seconds, and then we'll go around with one final question. Mr. Fink, go ahead.
Just on that issue, I mean, I think that—
Take 30 seconds.
Wrap up with respect to that question, or final
wrap
up?
Yes, no, wrap up with respect to that question.
Well, again, I want to get back on the focus, which is the environment. The environment is extremely important. I don't care how many bills you voted for. I don't care what you think about where we live. What I care about is action and a plan. And we need action, folks. And what I'm hearing from everybody is it's just going to get better. It's not going to get better. Trump is beating us up on this, and we need leaders who are going to fight with Trump, who have some knowledge of this area, to push him back on it, because he took off all the gas emission rules in California. That's hurt us tremendously and will hurt us going forward.
I want to, we really don't have a lot of time. I want to just go around the room. Let's ask a foreign policy question, which is, of course, also central to a Congress member's responsibilities. Many trouble spots in the world, many important relationships. I'll let you each just pick one and maybe spend 30 seconds talking about why that's important and what we need to do. So, Mr. Bowman, you can start, and then we'll go around in our order, and then we'll go to closing statements. So, Mr. Bowman, pick a spot, and what would you do?
We need to focus on peace and diplomacy across the world, and we need to work with our allies and others to end the climate emergency that is happening all over the world. Anyone who is committing a humanitarian crisis, we need to have honest conversations about that, hold them accountable. But this is an opportunity to come together across the world, focus on the climate emergency, put down the weapons, end the forever wars, and invest in diplomacy and peace. Our plan is a 21st century Marshall Plan, which will help us to rebuild the political and economic economy that we have helped destroy all over the world.
Mr. Ravelo, foreign policy?
Yes, well, we have to become the leaders of the world again. You know, the world obviously are looking at us with like we don't have a plan. So we must reiterate our support, obviously, for NATO. We obviously continue our support for Israel. We must support the U.S. Kurds, and we must limit the Russian and Iranian influence in the Middle East. Those are three of the key things that we should concentrate on.
Thank you very much. Mr. Engel, you're next.
Well, let me say that
You have 30 seconds, sir.
the president has really shamed our country, pulling out of the World Health Organization, telling our allies in Europe that we really don't want to help them, doing all kinds of things that these allies are successful for so many years under both parties. This president is just trying to absolutely disrupt, and that's why we need to replace him. That's why we need to elect Joe Biden as president. And I look forward to having a president with whom we can work. I mean, what this president has done, he's made us a mockery all over the world. You know, the virus, and I'll say this very quickly, he's so busy trying to blame China that he is not admitting the fact that for 2 or 3 weeks, we knew what was back then and didn't do anything. Trump didn't do anything. He sat on his hands. And so this is not a regime
Thank you.
that we can tolerate for 4 more years.
Mr. Fink?
Thank you, Gary. I think the biggest international issue that we need to address is immigration. We need to have humane immigration reform by improving border securities and target criminals, not families. I would provide no family separation and no discrimination based on religion, ethnicity, or country of origin. I would immediately lift the ban on immigration from Muslim countries, and I would end the funding for this ridiculous border wall. There's so many better places, especially education, where we can use that money because that wall doesn't work. I'd find a legal path to citizenship for dreamers and send support to Central American countries to improve the safety and security so we don't have an immigration problem from the Mexican border.
Thank you very much. Let's go to closing statements, gentlemen. I will just tell you, I certainly appreciate your passion. I think the voters also appreciate your passion. So you get a minute each. Mr. Bowman, you are first in our order. Go ahead.
I decided to run for office because we need 70,000 affordable homes right now in this district. We have an opioid crisis that's impacting every corner of this district. We have a homelessness crisis, particularly in Yonkers and pockets of the district where poverty rates are as high as 30%, disproportionately Black and brown. Our schools and healthcare systems are underfunded. And I know the personal impact of that because I've worked in education for 20 years and in this district for 10 years as a middle school principal and organizer beyond the walls of the school. I've been here on the ground building and creating and organizing with the people here, while Congressman Engel, who's been in office for 31 years, has lived in Maryland for 27 years. And while he has been in office, real wages have been stagnant and the price of housing, education, healthcare, food, it all has gone up. Where is his leadership? Where is he fighting with fire in his belly for the needs of the people in this district? He hasn't been a fighter. He hasn't been present. And during the pandemic, he said he was going to be here giving out supplies, and he lied about it while he was in Maryland at his home.
Mr. Ravelo.
Thank you. There is a clear choice in this election. You can continue with business as usual, like Congressman Engel, or you can elect the politics of division, like Jamaal Bowman. Both of these approaches have our government in Washington paralyzed. Or you can elect a leader that would lead from the front with a vision of that together we can get things done. I hope to be that choice. Hay que tomar una decisión en estas elecciones. Puedes continuar con la misma política de siempre o puedes elegir la política de división ambos enfoques tienen a nuestro gobierno paralizado. O puedes elegir a un líder con una visión que juntos podemos hacer muchas cosas más. Gracias.
Thank you. Gracias, senor. Mr. Engel, you are next.
Thank you. First, I want to thank my opponents. I know it got a little heated, but I appreciate the fact that we're all Americans and we're all running to make this country better. And I want to end the way I started. That was just a bit of silence for Mr. Floyd. This is not something that we are going to tolerate in this country. I have been elected and re-elected many times, and there's a reason for that, because I'm effective. And all these organizations say I'm effective. I've been rated one of the 10 most effective Democratic lawmakers by the Center for Effective Lawmaking. That's at everybody in the United States Congress. I was rated in the top 10. You don't get rated that way because you're not doing your job. You get rated that way if people know that you're doing a good job. And I feel I've done that with my constituents. I mentioned I come from the district. Let me say this. I work in Washington and I work in New York.
Okay, you have 10 seconds, sir.
I'm back and I'm forth. If I'm not in Washington, I should be criticized. When I am in Washington, I'm doing my job. And that's something that everybody knows. And despite all the rhetoric and the silliness and the lies about it, people are smarter than that. And I just final sentence is, I always say at the end of this 2-year term, I ask the voters to renew my contract. And here we are again.
Thank you.
Renew my contract. They've renewed it many, many times. And that's because I'm effective. And
Thank you. Mr. Fink.
I'm running for Congress because 1, I want to fix the crumbling infrastructure in our district. 2, I want to address the climate crisis once and for all. And 3, I have a plan to get us back to work safely while protecting our environment. I've lived in the district for 28 years. I'm the son of a union lineman from Con Ed. And I went through the public school system in New York from kindergarten through law school. Now is the time to fix our broken roads. Now is the time to focus on climate change. I have a plan that addresses the social, economic, and environmental, and I have practical and pragmatic solutions. There's really 3 types of issues we discussed today: international issues, national issues, and local issues. And if you want a congressperson who's going to focus on the local issues and the national issues that affect you every single day, well, I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and represent you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, a spirited debate is always welcome on BronxNet. We appreciate you really getting right into the core of what the democratic process is about. We urge all voters to come out on June 23rd. Jamaal Bowman, thank you. Sammy Ravelo, thank you. Congressman Eliot Engel, thank you. And Christopher Fink, thank you. Folks, again, please go out and vote on June 23rd. We have to thank the League of Women Voters for joining us. Also, the co-sponsors are the Bronx Times, Sneps Media, and the Riverdale Press. Next week, it will be the 79th Assembly District, and then on June 15th, we will debate for the 85th Assembly District. Both are open seats. Thank you, folks, for watching. Make sure you go out and vote. Thanks to our producer, Helen Greenberg, our timekeeper, a tough job, Yesenia Ramos, and to everyone, good night. Please stay safe. Tough times here in the Bronx, but we've got the spirit and the fight, and we're going to get through it. Thank you so much. Good night.